going to look into Protopie. So if you don't know what is Protopie, it is essentially a tool to prototype. They have an amazing tutorial series on like how to get you started in Protopie, how to bring your files from Figma, how to get going with Protopie to then like more advanced features. So you might say, as an UX and UI designer, how is it better than using Figma for small things here and there? Today we're going to talk about a scenario which I think would be best suited for people who work a lot between hardware and software. So let's just say you have a dashboard and you have some other touch surfaces around the car, or you have your phone that you do something on the phone and something happens on the larger screen. Now you can do all of that without writing a lot of code, and actually without writing any code, to be honest. What I faced struggle in the past is the fact that they allow your prototypes and multiple prototypes to talk to each other. This is prototype 1 and this is prototype 2, and they need to talk to each other. And they're running on a real device, two separate devices. The way Protopie enables that is something by using what they have developed is called Protopie Connect. One thing to keep in mind is that this phone should be connected to same Wi-Fi to be connected on the same network. You can Protopie Connect, which is a bridge software, doesn't have to be run on the same computer where you are running your Protopie Studio. It could run as a server in a separate computer. Now we have a prototype 1 running on our phone. And now we want to do this action of like image changing, not with another phone prototype, but with a real piece of hardware. This hardware has Wi-Fi or Ethernet. And just like before, we have our Protopie Connect. Imagine a scenario you are designing an interactive prototype within a car. You can write hardware code to send some signals to Protopie Connect, which then forwards those signals to your Protopie prototype. And that is possible with Protopie Connect with something called Bridge. These are essentially apps that are enabled to translate other language. I'm using language not as a computer programming language, but just to bring everyone on the same page. Language here just means like, a certain protocol. The bridge apps are designed or are able to basically translate your protocol into Protopie Connect's protocol. And the way Protopie Connect talks to the prototypes is using something called Socket.io. Socket.io is something that is used under the hood to talk to your prototypes. You're designing an HMI system where you might have a side control panel, LED strips, smart LED strips, dashboard, physical buttons. When they talk to each other, because that's the scenario where you might need to talk to each other, let's just say you input something, the LEDs change, the dashboard visuals, background change. All these things are talking to each other simultaneously. Usually when a creative technologist goes about developing these things, and when they develop this signaling architecture, they use something called mqtt. What is mqtt? It is not very important right now for you to know, but like you should know that this is also an event system. In a lot of interactive, complex scenarios, majority of the components talk to each other more or less most of the times using mqtt. Today we're looking at the mqtt bridge. There will be serial already there. MIDI, OSC are the things we're going to build in the future. So far we only have one project, and this is this bridge that we were talking about in the previous section. which sits on top of the Protopie. If I'm here in my local repository for the project, and if I go into the Python mqtt bridge, I'm going to see that I have pypi mqtt bridge. So the naming convention of the folders for the virtual environments are pypi. So you can go source pypi fish, and now we are in the virtual environment. Now we are activated in the environment. We have a bunch of files or modules. The purpose of the script, the one I have rewritten some of the scripts and built on top of Protopies themselves from their original repository examples, is because I wanted to make it easier for a lot of people to use it without actually thinking so much. So the idea behind is that the script should be very easy to run. It should be very easy to config so that I don't have to go inside the code as much as possible. Our main entry point is app.py. So if we run .help or .h, we get a helped, we can pass with shorthand our config file as an argument. If you don't have a config file, then by default it's going to look into the folder for config.yaml. If it doesn't find the config.yaml as a default option, then it's going to throw an error. We have the script mode and text user interface mode. And what that essentially does is it launches in the script mode like a command line, With the text user interface mode, it's organized pretty much so you can see like different kind of things. So we'll try both of these. And we have the map, which actually shows our config, throws back at us so we can read and review before we launch the app, and the bridge. And in the auto mode, it's kind of like a daemon mode. It's not going to ask you for any prompts because we have prompts for us to, that stops has breakpoints so that we can launch carefully and check at things before we launch it. By default, if we just launch it, it's gonna take config.yaml and it's gonna launch it in the script mode. So it's asking used config file, is it found a config file, and going to launch in the simple script mode by default, right? Do we want to proceed? Why not? So first you'll see it's trying to connect to a broker, and this information are there in the config file. We will go through that. It then is trying to connect to the Protopie connect server. All these arguments, details of the servers are passed into the config file, and then it's going to look for which mqtt topics to subscribe to, etc, etc. We're going to stop it here for now, and then we'll also show you very quickly the TUI mode or the UI mode. Yes. And so here we have the UI mode where the app is launched. So you can see the status of the broker that is connected to, that it's also connected to, it's turned green. Now it's connected to the Protopie. So let's just say I kill my Protopie connect. Come back here, it's red. So it's not connected. So let me relaunch Protopie connect. Now it's connected, as you can see. Great. Same goes for the mqtt. I have mqtt with my custom conf file, meaning I have like few configurations in there from a security standpoint that I like to do. And here in the fields we have the input mqtt messages, or let's just say that the ones that we are subscribed to. And then we have the input Protopie messages. So if we receive these messages from Protopie, we should translate them into these mqtt messages. So just like before, like it's bidirectional. Let's read the config file and try to understand like what's happening. We have some Protopie configs, they're well labeled. We have some mqtt configs. First one we're looking at is socket.io to mqtt. Input is coming from Protopie prototypes, which uses socket.io, and then the output is going to be transformed into an mqtt style event, and that can be used for many different things, up to you what you are using that for. So this basic layout and everything, you can choose to do basic things in Protopie itself, or you can import it from Figma. So for our demo's sake, what we have here is a knob, a toggle on and off button, and a slider variable that affects certain things. So for example, here we can move it around, but essentially this is moved around by our knob here. So the way Protopie works, and we are focusing specifically amongst many other things that Protopie can do, is events. How to send events out, or how to receive events. Let's just say for the slider, what it's essentially doing is when the slider value changes, update label on the screen and send the value to Protopie Studio. Please mind that Protopie Studio and not the current scene, because that's essentially sending it to the bridge, Protopie Studio, outside the Protopie's world itself. And send the brightness and send the slider value, which is a variable, I have declared as a global variable. My button, toggle button on and off, is also sending value out, and my knob is actually receiving value. Code that I have written on the hardware with the rotary encoder is that if the value is bigger than the previous value, then say it has moved forward. So it only says forward, 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 backward, 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 and we have like a step dial effect, more or less, and we have some smoothing between these two. So rotate clockwise is like that, rotate anti-clockwise is like that, and we have some easing effects here. What you need to understand is the send and receive attributes and the messages and the values. So we are transforming, if we have to transform messages from socket IO to mqtt, we are transforming message ID to topic and value to payload. Those are the similar things in these two different protocol worlds, right? So if our message ID, if we receive switch from our Protopie prototypes, then we need to transform them to a understandable topic that's up to you, or the person who's designing the network and the architecture. But this is essentially going to be an mqtt topic of your choice. We also have brightness as a message ID that's coming from the slider, if you remember, and we have transformed that into a mqtt topic called slider value, and we are passing here, it's the funny thing, it's called raw value. So it's a fixed thing that cannot be changed, and this is what the config file uses to determine, should I use exactly the same value and pass it on directly? If so, then use a raw value and raw payload, or raw topic. Means if I say raw value, if I have the message ID brightness and the message value as raw value set in the config file, what it's going to do is it's going to look for, if anything after brightness, message ID comes any value of brightness, it's going to pass it along, right? And so you can use raw value and raw payload, but you can also say whatever, you can put a raw value here, and then you can say, like, just for fun, you can put like 10 or whatever number. So it doesn't matter if your value changes, it's going to only send 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, or that fixed number that you have set, or any other value that you have set for that matter. Then we have the part that's coming from outside into our prototypes. So from mqtt world into the Protopie socket IO world. So now we have to map our topics, external topics, mqtt topics, to the Protopie connect. So topic to message ID and payload to value. Once you get it, it's very simple, but to wrap your head around it the first time, it's a bit complicated, because you are not writing and sitting down and writing if-else code yourself. You are giving it, you're kind of writing an if and else code, but without going into that ugly code that I have written. This is mainly for creative technologists, honestly. For designers, what you need to understand is how this signaling working, and align that with your creative technologist, or a technologist who is taking care of the architecture and who knows how to use this tool on top of Protopie Connect. And so now what you're seeing on the right hand side again is essentially my phone that is mirrored onto my Mac, and I have this hardware over here. It's mirrored and it's glitching but essentially I have an island that gives me status if it's connected to everything properly or not, right? So it's launching, it's looking for the Wi-Fi. It also, by the way, has a config file. Of course, I love config files. So it also has a config file where all these attributes are passed, like the broker, security details, encryption details, Wi-Fi credentials if it has Wi-Fi. You can also put an Ethernet adapter to it to connect it over wired Ethernet and not Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi is also not secure, for example, for certain sensitive setups you might want to have in the future. Essentially, if you'll see, if I turn on my switch, this gets on, and you can see on the screen mqtt message is received and being forwarded. Received a message from Protopie Connect servers, which is on, relaying that mqtt message now to this thing, and this thing, if it receives that message, it turns on the light. And we will, if we move this one now, we can see on our screen that on the phone our prototype is actually moving. All this explanation to show you this demo, to essentially tell you the fact that this can be done in a very graceful way using already existing tools that Protopie has developed, but to also develop something that uses mqtt, because that is hugely used in a development environment. Talking about automotive industry where I came from, we adopted it like a long time ago to build all our event systems based on mqtt. But it is also used in smart home and whatnot. Please have a look at the tool, at this tool that we have developed. If you have any questions, something is not clear, drop us a line, create an issue. I will try to fix it as soon as possible. And this would be it. Thank you for being with us and watching over the video. See you on the next one.